There are people whose departure leaves behind only a light void, soon forgotten with time. But there are others, though they quietly step out of someone's life, who leave behind a deep resonance, a lingering regret that endures. What creates that difference? It is not perfection, not appearance, not pleasing others. It is the depth of one's character, the honesty that needs no explanation, the way you live true to your nature, without display, without pretense. We live in a society that teaches us how to be noticed, but rarely how to be unforgettable. Yet Stoic philosophy from thousands of years ago offers an answer. Become the strongest, most authentic version of yourself, not to impress, but so you never need permission to live as you are. This is not a journey of seeking approval, but one of building inner strength, one step at a time. 1. Dare to be real, not a role. Many of us live behind a mask, not to hide guilt, but to be accepted. We don't call it fake, we call it being polite, being adaptable, fitting in. But in truth, much of what we present each day is just an edited version of ourselves. We filter our words, soften our emotions, conceal our wounds, bury our anger, and sometimes we even hide our joy for fear of being too much. We play the gentle one so no one feels uncomfortable, the funny one to be welcomed, the strong one so we're not seen as weak. But the most important question is, what about you? Behind every forced smile, behind every nod of agreement when you don't truly agree, a part of you gets left behind. And when this goes on long enough, you begin to forget who you were in the first place. You no longer know what you truly believe, what you're simply acting out to fit in. And what's more troubling is this. Others may come to love the version you've shown them, but you, deep down, start to lose respect for yourself. Because you know all of it is survival, not authenticity. Stoic philosophy doesn't ask you to bear your emotions to the world, nor to say everything you think. But it does demand this. Do not trade your inner truth for external approval. Epictetus once said, if you truly wish to improve yourself, be willing to be seen as foolish. For the path to real strength lies not in being liked, but in remaining loyal to your values, even when no one stands with you. We often think living honestly is easy, but the truth is, it takes courage. Courage not to smile when you don't feel joy. Courage to say, I disagree, even when you know it won't be well received. Courage to remain silent in a crowd chasing something you know is empty. Courage not to pretend you're fine when you're breaking inside. Courage to accept that you may be misunderstood, judged, or rejected, and still choose to be real, because you know, while pretense may bring temporary connection, it slowly corrodes your self-respect. The truth is, those who live authentically won't always be liked. They may be called difficult, unpolished, or inconsiderate. But in the end, they're the ones we remember. Not because of appearance, but because of honesty. Not because they were perfect, but because they were genuine. They never tried to stand out, yet they carried a quiet gravity wherever they went. And when they're gone, people don't miss a pleasant presence. They miss something real and rare. This world doesn't lack people who say the right things, play the right roles, maintain the right image. What we lack are those with enough courage to live unedited. Not because they have nothing to hide, but because they refuse to trade truth for acceptance. Living authentically doesn't mean being selfish. It doesn't mean being careless. It simply means protecting your spirit from slowly leaking away by trying to be a copy. The real question isn't, do they like you? It's, do you respect yourself while living like this? If each day you have to strain just to remain in a relationship, a workplace, or a role where you no longer recognize yourself, then that is no longer life. That's survival. And the saddest part is, others will never realize what they lost because they never truly met the real you. Start with the smallest things. Don't fake a smile when you're exhausted. Speak a sincere opinion instead of staying silent to keep the peace. Admit, "I'm not okay today," instead of pushing through with, "I'm fine." Every time you live truthfully, you return to yourself, and each of those moments builds a person of depth and quiet strength, not because they're widely liked, but because they're not easily forgotten. Honesty always comes at a cost. But if you're willing to pay it, you'll gain something no one can imitate. A self that is solid, free, and irreplaceable. And that, more than perfection, is what people regret losing. Not because you were flawless, but because you were real. And real, amid a world of performers, is the rarest thing of all. 2. Turn silence into strength. In an increasingly noisy world, where everyone competes to speak, to be seen, to stand out, silence seems to signal weakness, dullness, or a lack of things to say. But Stoic philosophy teaches the opposite. Silence is not a deficiency, but a profound expression of inner strength. It is the stillness in which a person observes, reflects, and chooses how to respond rather than react. And from that choice, from that calm, a unique kind of strength is born, a strength that doesn't need to impress but still commands respect. Silence does not mean indifference. It is the expression of self-control. A person who knows when to stay silent doesn't lack things to say. They simply see no need to prove anything. They understand that not every statement deserves a rebuttal, not every person deserves an argument, not every situation calls for words. Often, a steady gaze or a firm silence is the strongest answer. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that we cannot control others, only our own responses. And sometimes, the best response is no response at all, preserving our stillness to protect our inner peace. In daily conversations, we're easily drawn into meaningless exchanges, biased remarks, or impulsive reactions born from pain. Those who lack discipline often speak to defend their ego, to be right, to assert their worth. But those with true strength need none of that. They don't need to be understood immediately, don't need to win every argument, don't need others to agree. Because they know what matters, what's worth keeping, what should be let go. And they choose silence as a reminder to themselves. I am not responsible for others' emotions. I am responsible for my own peace. This silence is not avoidance. It is a conscious decision. It reflects emotional maturity. When you remain silent in the face of insult, it's not because you're weak. It's because you refuse to let others control your reaction. When you choose not to engage in a fruitless argument, it's not because you lack reasoning, but because you understand that peace is more valuable than winning a useless debate. Silence becomes a symbol of freedom. Freedom from the need to be acknowledged, to be right, to please others. What's remarkable is this. Those who remain silent at the right time, in the right way, are often the ones people remember most. In a room full of voices, it's the quiet person with presence who draws attention. In a noisy crowd, the calm yet resolute one carries weight. You don't need to be the center of every conversation to make an impact. Sometimes your silence alone forces others to pause and reflect, to ask questions, to examine themselves. And that subtle influence, that quiet power, is what makes you unforgettable. A Stoic does not need to win every confrontation. Their victory lies in retaining themselves. They don't let emotions dictate their actions. They don't turn pain into a weapon to hurt others. They don't let anger or pride override clarity. And silence is the means by which they preserve that clarity. They understand that impulsive reactions often lead to regret, while silence can preserve a relationship, a peaceful day, even their own self-respect. Perhaps you've met someone whose calm presence earned your respect. They didn't speak much, didn't argue, didn't seek to dominate. But you knew they saw everything. You knew they were feeling, thinking, analyzing. And precisely because they didn't say it out loud, you paid even closer attention. When people like that leave, they leave behind a silence that lingers. Not because they ever said something loud, but because they showed up with strength and depth. So if you find yourself out of place in all the noise, don't force yourself to change. If you feel no need to speak just to be recognized, don't mistake yourself for being weak. Hold on to silence as a form of strength. Practice it as a skill. Let your silence speak for you. And then you'll realize those who are silent but steadfast are never insignificant. They are the ones others will regret not having listened to more carefully, not having understood with more patience, not having held on to with more depth. 3. Don't wait to be chosen. Learn to choose yourself. There's a truth few dare to admit. Most of us have either lived or are still living to be chosen by others. We try to become the most likable, most agreeable, most adaptable version of ourselves, just to be kept in a relationship, a group, or an opportunity. We edit ourselves not because it's what we truly want, but because we fear that being real might mean no one will want us. But living this way eventually leaves us exhausted, because few things drain the soul more than constantly pleasing others just to hold on to a place we're no longer even sure we want. From childhood, we were taught to raise our hands to speak, to be good to earn praise, to strive for attention from teachers, to stay quiet so our parents wouldn't be disappointed. Over time, we learned this. To be accepted, we must wait to be called on. And so, as adults, we carry this habit everywhere. With work, with love, with society. We wait for someone else to see our worth before we believe we have any. We wait for someone to love us before we dare to love ourselves. We wait for someone to agree with us before we dare defend our point of view. But here's the problem. The more we wait, the more we surrender ownership of our lives to others. And nothing is more fragile than a sense of worth that must be approved to exist. Stoic philosophy doesn't tell us to be cold or cut ourselves off from the world, but it does emphasize this. You have the right to decide who enters your life. You are not meant to sit and wait to be chosen. When you know who you are, you no longer bow just to be accepted. You no longer need validation to feel right. You no longer depend on praise to feel worthy, because you're not living to be chosen. You are living to choose, from awareness, from values, from a clarity built through discipline and wisdom. The real issue is this. When you're obsessed with being seen as valuable by others, you'll easily tolerate those who only drain you. You'll trade principles for acceptance, peace for shallow relationships, honesty for a few moments of recognition. And one day you'll realize you've lost your ability to choose because your whole life has become a reflection of settling for less than you deserve. Learning to choose yourself means asking questions like, do I truly want to be here? Do I still respect myself when I'm around this person? Am I living for real peace or just trying to avoid abandonment? When those questions arise, it's not rebellion, it's awakening. And from that awakening, you begin to build new standards, not standards to control others, but to protect the clarity within, not to inflate the ego, but to safeguard self-respect. Not to judge right from wrong, but to discern between genuine connection and conditional attachment. Those who live from a place of self-choice carry a different kind of energy. They're not loud, not flashy, but always unmistakably clear. They don't seek to impress, yet they command respect through their certainty. They don't fall into ambiguous relationships because they understand. Real connection doesn't require one-sided effort. They're willing to walk away from anything that demands they betray their truth just to stay. And that is what makes them rare. Not because everyone loves them, but because they don't need to be loved to be themselves. Make no mistake, choosing yourself is not arrogance. It's humility grounded in clarity and self-respect. It doesn't reject others, but it refuses to cling blindly. It doesn't push people away, but it never begs them to stay. It's the calm that comes when a door closes. Because you know if a place doesn't honor your worth, there's nothing they're worth holding on to. Those who live like this don't demand anything from others, because they've already held on to what matters most, themselves. Out there, the world will always offer relationships that make you feel like you're not enough. There will always be places that ask you to shrink to fit, but you were not born to be bent, to be packed into tight molds. You were born to choose. Choose who walks with you. Choose environments that help you grow. Choose values to uphold. Choose peace over being conditionally accepted. And when you choose instead of waiting to be chosen, you begin a new journey. One of agency, of freedom, of a worth that no one else defines. That's when you become irreplaceable, and those who once lost you will come to regret it. 4. Hold your emotions, but master them. None of us were born with a manual for our emotions. We learn to feel through experience, through wounds, rejection, and unreciprocated love. At the same time, society teaches us to restrain, to keep appearances, to be mature in a distorted way. Don't cry in public. Don't get angry when insulted. Don't express strong emotions or you'll be judged as weak or overreacting. And so we grow up in a world where emotion is treated as something to hide, suppress, and clean up. But Stoic philosophy offers a different view. It doesn't teach us to kill emotion, but to master it. Mastering emotion is not suppression. It is the ability to recognize what you're feeling, understand why, and choose how to respond rather than react. Those who lack emotional mastery are often ruled by their feelings. They say things that wound others in anger, make rash decisions in panic, run or cling because they can't bear loneliness. These reactions may be instinctive, but their consequences are lasting. In contrast, someone who masters their emotions doesn't deny sadness, anger, or disappointment. They create space between feeling and action. They allow emotion to exist, but do not let it dictate their fate. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Emotions are part of the mind. When you learn to pause before reacting, you move from a passive to an active state. This doesn't mean you become cold or numb. In fact, you may feel even more deeply, but you don't let emotion move you like a puppet. You don't let anger drag you into conflict. You don't let fear keep you from opportunity. You don't let sadness become the reason you lose yourself. The truth is, the more sensitive someone is, the more easily they're carried away by emotion. But these same people, if disciplined, develop the strongest intuition, deepest empathy, and become a steady anchor for others. Because they don't rush to react. They know how to listen inwardly. They wait for the storm within to settle before deciding. They aren't numb. They simply don't let fleeting emotion destroy enduring values. Emotionally disciplined people also understand this. Emotion isn't bad. Anger isn't bad. Hurt isn't bad. Jealousy, envy, disappointment, all are valuable signals pointing to something within that needs attention. The issue isn't what you feel, but how you handle what you feel. If you suppress it, the emotion will find its way out through biting words, mental exhaustion, or nameless aches. But if you face it, acknowledge it, and master it, emotion becomes life force, becomes truth, guiding you toward deeper self-understanding. Epictetus once said, "We are disturbed not by what happens, but by our interpretation of it." Emotions don't arise on their own. They are shaped by perception, by perspective, by the stories we tell ourselves. Change the story, and the emotion changes. When you understand that anger is a reaction to unheard pain, that fear is a warning of what you're not ready to face, that sadness is a call for comfort, you no longer fear emotion. You learn to sit with yourself without being swept away. Mastering emotion is a long path, one that demands consistent training and brutal honesty with yourself. But once you gain it, you're no longer shaken by someone's words, a cold glance, or an unanswered message. You become someone whose inner calm outweighs outer chaos, and that quiet steadiness, unpolished, unassuming, is what earns lasting respect. Because the one who controls themselves cannot be controlled by anyone, and that is a silent, irreplaceable kind of strength. 5. Know when to walk away. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. And not every place you once belonged is somewhere you need to return to. We're often taught how to hold on, how to forgive, how to keep trying. But few teach us a more important lesson: knowing when to walk away. Leaving is not failure, not selfishness, not avoidance. Walking away, when done with clarity and at the right time, is a profound act of self-respect. It's a declaration that says, "I choose myself, and I deserve more than this." There are relationships that make you feel smaller each day. Environments that don't let you breathe without feeling suffocated. Conversations that leave you more drained than heard. And there are places, people that once gave you beautiful memories, but now are just shadows of the past, pulling you backward every time you try to move forward. Loyalty, when misplaced, becomes a shackle, and patience, without self-respect, becomes a form of self-harm. Knowing when to leave means knowing the limits of your endurance. It means understanding you have no obligation to remain in a place where you constantly have to prove your worth. It means realizing that love, respect, and companionship should not have to be earned. They should naturally exist if the relationship is still healthy. When you have to strain just to keep someone around, when you must stay silent to preserve a pleasant atmosphere, when you shrink yourself to please others, you're no longer in a connection, you're trapped in a compromise. And that, sooner or later, will wear you down from within. Stoic philosophy teaches that while we cannot control others, we can control our response and our choices. Walking away, then, is not impulsive, it is conscious action. The awareness that you are no longer who you used to be. That you are growing and need a different environment, a different energy, a space that nurtures your growth instead of stifling it. Leaving doesn't require hatred or arguments or justice. Sometimes it only takes your quiet presence, folding everything away gently, turning your back and walking out. To affirm that your self-respect has grown to the point where you no longer need noise to prove anything. People often feel regret after you leave, not because you caused a scene, but because they never imagined the quiet one could walk away without looking back. And that is a kind of power that needs no spectacle. When you leave with calm, without blame, without accusation or bitterness, you leave behind a real emptiness, one that can't be filled by late apologies or vague remorse, because you once showed up fully, and now your absence is just as complete. Don't wait until you're completely drained to walk away. Don't wait until you've lost trust in yourself to let go. Don't wait until you can't recognize yourself in the mirror to realize you've stayed too long in something unworthy. Learn to see the signs, when your voice is no longer heard, when your kindness is taken for granted, when your emotions are consistently dismissed. That is no longer a place to stay. It's an invitation to leave. Walking away sometimes hurts, but that pain is necessary to preserve what's still good within you. The pain of awakening is always the beginning of rebirth. And you'll come to see, there's no peace like leaving at the right time, no strength like a decisive step, and nothing more haunting than someone who walked away in silence and kept their dignity intact. You don't need to stay to prove anything anymore. You only need to love yourself enough to know, I deserve a different place, one that doesn't ask me to shrink just to exist. 6. Love from wholeness, not from lack. Love, if it begins from a void, soon becomes a negotiation. When you love someone simply because you feel lacking, feel empty, or fear being alone, that love is no longer a form of sharing. It becomes a form of pleading. You're not truly giving. You're loving as a way to be rescued, to be filled, to feel enough. And the painful truth is, no one can give you a sense of wholeness if you've never given it to yourself. We grow up surrounded by stories that glorify sacrifice in love. That to love is to give everything, that the more you love, the more you deserve. That if you love enough, everything will be okay. But the truth is, love cannot save an empty soul. You can love someone deeply, but if within you there's an endless emotional hunger, that love will always become a chase. A chase for validation, for assurance, for being held on to, and you lose yourself in the process. Stoic philosophy does not reject love. It does not say, don't love, don't attach, don't sacrifice. It teaches this: if love makes you lose reason, if it drains you just to sustain it, then it is no longer love. It is dependency. And all dependency leads to suffering because you've handed the control of your emotions to someone else. When you love from lack, you easily forgive what shouldn't be forgiven. Hold on to people who no longer stay out of love and accept things that hurt you, just to avoid facing the emptiness after letting go. Loving from wholeness is different. It is a love built from fullness within. When peace lives in your heart, you don't love to lean, you love to walk beside. You don't love to prove your worth. You love because you see value in both sides. You don't love as a survival need. You love as a gift to be shared, lightly, steadily, without pressure, without control. When you love like this, love isn't a burden. It's a source of strength for both to grow. Marcus Aurelius once said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to think, to enjoy, to love." He didn't say love is a duty, a goal, or self-validation. He said it's a privilege, which means it's not something to depend on, but something to be grateful for when it comes. And to feel gratitude for love, you must stand in a place where you no longer need it to survive. You must feel that even without someone beside you, you are still whole, still worthy, still a life worth living. Someone who loves from wholeness doesn't demand constant reassurance. They don't analyze every change in expression, every pause in a message, every delayed reply to find hidden meanings. They have trust, but not blindness. They give, but do not lose their boundaries. They attach, but do not fuse their fate to another. And that makes them gentle yet deep, calm yet not distant. They never love with a plea of, "Please don't leave me," but with a posture of, "I want to walk with you, but I remain myself, even if you walk away." Loving from wholeness is also how you protect the people you love, because nothing drains a relationship faster than having to constantly fill someone else's emotional gaps. When you know how to care for yourself, the love you give won't become a burden. It won't demand, strain, or manipulate through emotion. It will feel like a place to return to, not a place of sacrifice. 7. Live by principle, not by compromise. There's one truth every adult must face. You cannot live true to your values and be liked by everyone at the same time. There will be moments when you must choose between truth and convenience, between self-respect and acceptance, between your principles and the need to belong. And if you don't have a clear set of values, things you will never compromise, boundaries you won't let others cross, principles you're willing to uphold at any cost, you will easily trade away who you are just to survive. But surviving at the expense of your character, your conscience, and your identity is not living. It's self-destruction, one compromise at a time. Living by principle does not mean being rigid or unwilling to listen. It is the ability to remain steady inside even when everything around you is shaking. It's the courage to say no when everyone else says yes. It means refusing to act against your conscience just to stay included, refusing to bow simply out of fear of being left out. Personal principles, when built from serious reflection and authentic values, not prejudice, become the compass for your actions, your words, and how you treat yourself. And what's remarkable is this. Over time, people who live by principle become the ones others trust, respect, and fear losing. In a society that prizes flexibility as a virtue, those with principles may be seen as difficult, unyielding, or too firm. But true flexibility is not blind compromise. Flexibility means knowing how to adapt without losing your core. It means knowing when to stay quiet, but never staying silent when your values are being violated. It means keeping a gentle attitude, but never allowing others to trample your boundaries. Conscious flexibility built on a foundation of clear principles, that is true adaptability. But if you're constantly bending to every situation, every demand, every external expectation without ever asking, "Is this betraying myself?" then you're abandoning who you are just to keep existing. Stoic philosophy reminds us that the only thing we can truly control is our actions and our character. Epictetus once said, "Never regard something as beneficial if it requires you to betray your promise, lose your self-respect, or hate another person." In other words, anything that forces you to bend your moral code, lower your dignity in exchange for a little approval, a little love, a little acceptance, that thing costs too much. And the true price you'll pay is the quiet erosion within. The growing distance from yourself, the way your reflection no longer earns your respect. Living by principle is also how you define boundaries in relationships. You don't need to over-explain when saying no to something that unsettles your spirit. You don't need to keep pleasing people who keep ignoring your limits. You don't need to hold on to someone just because they've been around for a long time if their presence now drains you. When you have principles, you begin to filter energy. You no longer feel guilty for walking away from what's toxic, and you no longer feel lonely when standing alone, because you know you're standing where you're meant to be. I believe we've all experienced being overlooked, abandoned, or misjudged simply for being too real, too deep, or too different. But the older I get, the more I believe this. Truth is still worth holding on to, even if it makes you lonely for a while. Nothing brings me more peace than knowing who I am, what I need, and who deserves to be part of my life. When you stop trying to fit every mold, you begin to live with more direction. When you dare to hold your principles, to walk away, to say no, you are no longer a version that's easily replaced. And when you love from fullness, you no longer chase anyone or fear losing them, because you know what's truly yours will stay. That's not pride, that's freedom. And in a world full of noise, the one who protects their inner freedom is the one who cannot be forgotten. If something in this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. And remember this, you don't need to become someone else to be loved. You only need the courage to be fully yourself without apology. See you in the next video.